Of course. I always forget that I have my microphone muted. Oh, I had to go into my last week's video and fix it. Let me know how it sounds. I have a lot of fans running because it's a little bit warm today. So if it sounds okay, let me know. If not, I can always adjust it. Thank you, UberQ Funk. That was very silly of me. Welcome, everybody, to the world building stream. Let me just repeat what I previously said. I hope you're all having a good Sunday. I had a pretty good Sunday. It got away from me a little bit. I slept in, and then I ran a session of my Eberron game, which we run on Patreon. That was very fun. Interestingly, a lot of world building in that. It was almost more world building than it was actual playing. Thanks for noticing. Oh, my technical difficulties, EberQ. And then I did a little work in the afternoon, and now I'm here, and I'm excited to get started world building again with you guys. This week we have a very exciting topic. We're going to be talking about monsters. This is one of my favorite things to do in terms of world building for this new campaign. So if you've never tuned in before, welcome. Basically, the premise here is that every week we take a new topic and we work on a little bit of world building for my upcoming epic multi-party dwarven political intrigue campaign, in which the players assist a nascent dwarven monarch in reclaiming their ancestral homeland, either by forging political alliances with other dwarven powers or foreign merchants or whatever it may be, or by clearing out dungeons and ancient ruins of their monsters that have accumulated over 500 years of exile and decay. So speaking of monsters that might be accumulating in dwarven dungeons, we're going to talk about some of those today. So I have a big list here, as you can see, full of different types of monsters. I think I went through every supplement I could find that listed monsters by environment type, and I copied them all over if they were underground, or they were mountain, or they were sort of tundra, because those are kind of the three biomes that we have in Khûm, which is our dwarven kingdom. And I've done a lot of these already, so I'm going to scroll up and show you, but I have kind of little rubrics for each type of monster and what exactly it does and how, kind of where it exists in Khûm. So obviously, you know, all these monsters for the most part are extant monsters in D&D. A lot of them are from kind of older editions or versions of D&D that, you know, are not really current. And so what's been really fun for me is trying to find ways of taking these sort of classic monsters and then reinterpreting them for my upcoming campaign and my world, right? Because there's lots of really, really bizarre ones. Let me find it. Like a Flumps, obviously now kind of enjoy new popularity. Let me find a weirder one. The Chrismal is a great example. So the Chrismal is a very kind of weird, particular, like psionic creature from the elemental plane of Earth that I found in a previous edition that was kind of weird. Basically, they're like little bugs or scorpions that are made out of crystal. And a lot of these established lore with the Chrismal is kind of boring, and I wasn't really interested in it. It didn't really fit into the world building that I'm doing for Khûm. So kind of the task today, and whenever we work on monsters, is to go through and pick a handful of monsters from my list and find new ways to interpret them. So I took them from these strange psionic creatures into basically being these little insect-like parasites that feed on mineral deposits, particularly found in precious gemstones. And they kind of end up like burrowing into the gem and then having the gemstone sort of like grow onto them. So they kind of look like these little scampering gems, almost like a scarab or something like that. And then it's about figuring out like their history and their description, and then like how they kind of work their way into dwarven culture. Usually by coming up with a handful of adventure hooks about them. The Chrismal is a great example of a monster that is weird and doesn't really have a history, but I have a whole bunch of them here, starting up here. You can't see it, but up here on the top we have the Ankheg, and then, you know, the Behir and the Carrion Crawler and the Chrismal, and going all the way through. So what I normally do is I just roll a d20 and then determine from that which monster I want to work on. And then once I'm done with that monster, I delete it from the list, and then I roll another d20, right? And we kind of work our way through the list. So as you can see, there's probably about 30 monsters left on this list, and I have the top 20 already numbered or statted up. Hey, what's up, Jose? Thanks for coming. But today, because we have y'all here, I kind of figured that y'all could just pick what you think is the most exciting monster to work on. Usually we try to get about 3 of them done. I have a 2-hour block, so if it's like 45 minutes or so per monster. But yeah, here's our list. I'll just kind of read them all off. Aboleth, Black Pudding, Cave Bear, Cave Fisher, Chagrin, Dark Mantle, Drogazar, Gargoyle, Gas Spore, Geonid, Galebdur, Hook Horror, Nell Beetle, Koatoa, Lava Child, Mephit, Metal Master, Mustard Jelly, Ochre Jelly, which apparently those are two different things, mustard and ochre being two different kinds of jelly, an Oread, which is a very weird one, Odiug, Paraton, Piercer, Quaggoth, Roper, Rust Monster, Spitting Crawlers, I do not remember what that is, a Tear, a Troll, a Warg, a Winter Hag, a Jorn, a Yak Folk, and a Zaratan. So these are kind of all of our different... Hey, what's up, Christopher? Yeah, you're exactly right, Jose. Yeah, think of them as like moths in coats. That's perfect. That's kind of how I do them. So these are all of our different options. Are there any of these 30 or so monsters that seem really interesting to you guys? If y'all don't have a preference, we can just roll, or we can pick whichever one is most interesting. There are a handful of these I don't really remember. I think the Metal Master is like a weird slug, I think. I think the Oread is kind of like a dryad, but for stones. You guys discuss it. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to get a little bit of water because my throat is kind of dry from too much talking. So you guys look at that list and let me know if there's anything on there that's interesting to you. I'll be back in like 30 seconds after I've gotten my water bottle. Be right back. Oh, and I'm going to mute my microphone. So if I come back and it's, hey, Megara, welcome. Hey, Megara's a recent patron of ours. It's nice to see you. Thanks for coming to the chat. That's awesome. Okay, Hook Horror, we actually have... Oh, yeah, I actually already have Hook Horror. That is a good bet, though. I should have removed it from the list. We'll talk about Hook Horrors when I come back with some water. They're actually kind of fun. I like the sort of lore I came up with for Hook Horrors. Okay, I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience, everybody. I am back. Yo, what's up? Look at all these people. Christopher's here, Megara's here, Jose's here, Kirk showed up. What's up, Kirk? Alan? Okay, so, I'm seeing some votes for the Oread. You guys want to do the Oread? Like a dryad, but for stones? I might have to look them up because I don't actually know that much about them off the top of my head. What's up, Alan? How's everybody doing? Galebdur 100% sounds like a Star Wars character. Yeah, Oread, cool. Metal Master, yeah. The slug covered in armor is pretty wild. So let's do the Oread first, because we had a few votes for that, and then we can do Metal Master, and then maybe Galebdur. So here's what's interesting about the Oread. I already have a handful. Oh, I want to talk about Hook Horrors for Christopher really quick. So we're going to do a brief detour to Hook Horror, and I want to talk about them because they're fun. I already have them figured out, but I think they're cool. So Hook Horrors I have here. Bizarre inhabitants of subterranean Khûm. Hook Horrors are awkwardly avian-like creatures that feed on fungus and are known to be unnaturally aggressive. I describe them as being clumsy and awkward. A Hook Horror stands over 9 feet tall, has like a vulture's head and feet, a thick carapace, a pair of sweeping hooks. Basically what's interesting about them that they live in little clutches and they are matriarchal, but their main thing is that they are fiercely territorial. I kind of think of them as being like sort of the dwarven equivalent of a goose, right? Kind of like you are a horrible horror, right? A horrible hooked horror. So they basically, the way they work is that if you impinge on their territory or you trespass into their sort of domain, they will hound you forever. They hold grudges forever, and they kind of like haunt dwarven holds that are either killed or appeased. There's not a lot of history to them, but like the notion being that like dwarven miners accidentally might stumble into a Hook Horror's territory and it constantly plagues them. they're not necessarily terrible combatants. Like, you could defeat a hook horror, but it's like they're just so aggressive and so like persistent in their kind of contempt that I really liked the idea of them as basically being these giant, scary, underdark geese. Was my hook horror. I think that's kind of fun. Ooh, the Coatua. Yeah, those are interesting. Okay, cool. But let's talk about the Oread. So what's interesting about the Oread is that I actually have Oread. I'm not sure, because Dryad, Oread, maybe? Orad. I actually have a handful of sort of rock-related creatures already. Let me see if I can find them all. So we have the Dao, which are basically like, they're up here, which are basically like sort of genies, or they're jinn, that are earth-related. And the way that I've kind of done elementals in my setting is that rather than having them come from another plane, because there's not a lot of planar activity in Undune, the idea is that they are awakened earth elementals. That an elemental that is sort of left to its own devices for long enough, kind of robot style, or like AI, will eventually develop its own intelligence. And so a Dao is kind of like an elemental that you know achieved the singularity. An earth elemental. There's a lot there with them that they hate the idea of their former servitude, but then like genies, they have a tendency to keep slaves themselves. So there's this kind of like catch-22 thing with them, and a lot of genies are like that. But we have the Dao is one of the sort of like stone creatures that we have, and they have ability to earth glide and shape stone and that kind of thing. Obviously, they're earth elementals themselves. I also have, I think, Lith, which are a slightly different kind of creature. Sorry for all this the scrolling. Yeah, the Lith. So the Lith is similar. It's basically like an animated statue. Like if you make the comparison that an elemental is like a droid or a construct, right? A magical construct. That a Lith is an animated statue that has basically long since malfunctioned. It's either from overuse or lack of use or kind of depleted magical energy or a dozen other reasons. You guys can kind of see it there, the Lith. You know, they're kind of the remnants of an unthinking automaton. So almost like an animatronic that maybe had a purpose at one time, but now it either endlessly repeats it because it's malfunctioned in some way, right? So we have Dao, and we have proper elementals, and we have Lith. But what's interesting to me about the Oread, and I'm going to see if I can look it up here. I don't know how well that's going to translate to y'all. If I Google this, probably not great. So I might pull this into a different, yeah, I'll pull this aside. You guys keep looking at that, and I'm going to look at this. Some stuff in the chat. Yes, hook horrors do have terrible eyesight. Yeah, I like that they're very good at hearing, but bad eyesight. Use a hook horror nest. That way you can use them as random encounters for them looking for a bitch. Oh yeah, totally. That's definitely a thing, is you stumble into a hook horror nest. A Dao merchant. Oh yeah, that's cool. I could see that. But that's, again, they're not sea witches. They're like rock djinn. So an Oread, my understanding of them is that, yeah, they're basically like dryads or nymphs, but for stone, right? So I'm trying to find like an FR lore and see what we can get from that. FR wiki. Because the question is like, what do we decide that they are? Like, what's their niche, you know, in sort of Khûm? I'm not finding a lot about them. There's Nereids, however you say that, aquatic fae. Yeah, the Forgotten Realms wiki doesn't have a page on them. Interesting. So that means we got to come up with it ourselves, everybody. Okay. So let's make a page here. Myconids. So it'd start with an O. It would be after Ooze, but before Purple Worm and Umber Hulk. Those are really interesting too. We can get into that at a time. I've like linked them in their life cycle. So let's do Oreads. So I have a couple different categories here. Oop, you guys can't quite see it. There we go. So we have the summary, right, which is oh, the gray ooze actually is also kind of related. So the notion with the gray ooze is that it is an ooze, right, but it's basically like stone that Yogg, who's imprisoned beneath the earth, has infected to its own purposes. Yogg is slowly trying to creep its way out from beneath the crust of the earth, and so gray ooze is basically an elemental form of Yogg that it uses to weaken metals. Gray oozes have a tendency to rust and corrode metal in D&D, so my idea is that deep beneath the earth you can sometimes find like amorphous stone that's infused with Yogg's essence, and it seeks out metal, trying to eat away the sacro-steel core that protects, basically imprisons Yogg. So again, a gray ooze is also sort of a form of animate stone, right? But we have a couple different sort of organizational things here. We have their summary, like in brief, what the monster is, basically their hook. And then a longer description. It can either be a description or it can be culture or society. So we'll put, how do I phrase it? Biology, no. Description, no. Description. Yeah, it's mostly description. So I think there's sometimes if they're sentient, I'll do culture, but whatever, description. You know, what do they look like? Kind of how do they interact? And then history, going from ancient to Seven Sorrows to present day. And then I try to come up with 3 different like adventure hooks that could in some way pertain to the monster. So we're just going to delete these because these are from the Grey Ooze. And then I try to think of a threat. Basically, like what is the danger that this monster presents to the party? Whether it's something as simple as combat, or in the case of the Grey Ooze, because it has a tendency to eat people's equipment, it sort of represents impoverishment, right? A Grey Ooze probably won't hurt you, but it will almost certainly deal damage to your equipment, essentially. Okay, all that out of the way, I want to jump back in the chat and see what you guys are talking about, and let's start to brainstorm some ideas for the Oriad. Okay, I know that in Pathfinder, an Oriad is a person who has elemental heritage, like Genasi in 5e. So maybe Oriad is a person who got hit by a crazy amount of earth magic or something. Umber Hulks. It's an MOT. Oh, it's in Mordenkind's Tome of Foes. Okay. Oriads could be dwarves who ate too many / the wrong sorts of rocks. I like that one. Or like little delicate articulated rock guys, sort of like a G.I. Joe made out of stone with all the hinges. It's kind of cool. That almost honestly feels to me a little bit more like a Galeb Dur, which we'll get to in a bit. I like the idea of playing with the Oriad as a Fey creature specifically, right? So if you think of a Dryad as being a Fey. But what's interesting about that is that we haven't really delved into... ooh, they like to sneak around and steal your stuff when you camp. That's kind of cool. They're sort of little tricksters. Like little animate boulders. I can't decide whether that's better as an Oriad or as a Galeb Dur. Because I kind of see them, again, like they're also described as being called Stone Maidens, right? So, like, I think having it have a little bit more of a Dryad, like, Naiad kind of vibe feels cool to me. But I do like the idea of, like, it reminds me of those, in Moana, the little, like, coconut demons, the Kakimora, I think they're called. Like, having them be these little stone tricksters are kind of interesting. But I want to let's lean into this like Naiad like Fae idea. So I don't have a lot about Fae in this setting, which is probably something I need to figure out at some point. I don't envision them being terribly important in this campaign. But the notion of, I think the idea is that Fae creatures and Fae like there's no, since we don't really have other planes in Ondune, not really. The notion of anything that like smacks of Fae is kind of like I think of it as Fae creatures arise from areas where there is like a high concentration of arcane magic. So if you think of arcane magic kind of like radiation, that like irradiated areas would have a higher concentration of Fae. So they tend to be more isolated, less inhabited by people, right? And that's where you tend to get like the magic kind of breaks down the laws of reality and creatures start to operate in these different ways. So it makes trees come alive, you know, and it sort of turns mushrooms into these little creatures. Like I could see red caps having originally come from mushrooms. So perhaps an Oriad then is a creature born out of like too much magic in stone, right? And again, I like the notion of that sort of like, they're like those little stone Bratz dolls. It's so creepy. I always found the Bratz dolls to be really like disturbing with their giant heads, right? Like their huge eyes. So I like the idea of it's like stone given sentience, right? Given sentience is a theme. But I don't think it's like, again, what's the difference between that and a Dao? I think a Dao is an elemental, is like an evolved elemental, like an elemental that's achieved sentience. Whereas I think this kind of happened naturally. So if you think about the way I do fiends, then like devils and demons on Dune, is that they're both related to Yogg, but a devil, sort of a lawful evil creature, is a creature that existed like a human that was corrupted intentionally by Yogg, right? That like a tiefling is essentially could be either or, but if it's devilish, it was intentional. Yogg made this for a specific purpose. So Desdemonia in All Hell Yogg is technically a devil and not a demon because she was sort of raised and created as a succubus. Whereas a demon is a monster that already existed but was warped and corrupted by Yogg into something, kind of accidentally, like kind of, again, by radiation. So the question is, a Dao then feels sort of like deliberate. It was like made by a wizard, right? Like an elemental was created by a wizard specifically, whereas maybe an Oread is residual magic that created this being, right? Like a stone fairy, essentially. Yeah, it was accidentally created. You're exactly right, Megara. So I think it's something like that. I do think I want to stick to the stone maiden idea, but I don't want to lose the notion of the little tricksters. I think we can incorporate that into the Gale of Dur in a little bit. So that's cool, Alan. I don't want to lose that. But it's stone given sentience, and it was sort of created accidentally. If they map to dryads, right? Dryads are all about, like, they're tied to particular trees and they're and particular, groves and things like that. And they're all about protecting that. So it kind of seems, I mean, it makes sense that they would be like tied to stones, boulders. Like, could it be veins of ore, right? Because then you could get something interesting with like a gold Oread, right, or a copper Oread. Like if they're tied to specific types of metal, that could be cool, right? I sort of like that. Like dryads, and I'll probably, this is gonna be, my notes are gonna be very sloppy. When I go back, I'll kind of clean them up and make them look really nice. They are tied to, I like specific veins of ore, hence the name, right? Veins of ore, like copper. Oops. Oh, one thing I should point out is that I have the way that my Google Doc is set up right now. It has to be zoomed way out in order for you guys to see it, just because of the way OBS works. So I apologize if I make some typos, because I can barely read what I'm writing. So if there's and I think I have my spell checker off just as it would highlight every single made up word. Like copper, gold, or silver. It seems like tacitly then what you're saying is that they like protect those things, right? Like protective, they are tied to and protective of specific veins of ore, right? Did elves make Oreads? Ooh, interesting. Are they hunted, trapped? Can they exist apart from their homes? Yeah, I like that, Alan. One in a cage, frowning. I think it's the dryad rule, right? Like if you separate them from the tree, do they die? How do dryads work? Do they die if they're separated? But I feel like they're very connected to it. Did elves make them? I don't think they did, because I feel like nymph, divine servants that inhabit unspoiled corners of the world. Some embody violent aspects of nature. In some tales, a smith finds an Oread and allows it to relish in the... So this is this from Tome of Foes, Jose? Because I actually don't have that book. That's good to know. Yeah, his question, are they hunted or trapped? That's really interesting. Because to me, it seems like if you're making the like logging to trees to dryads analogy, right? That a dryad would get in the way of someone trying to log it. So is an Oread essentially like a tree hugger, but for ore? Like they don't want you to mine this ore because it's their home, right? Like it's their mother, or however you want to phrase it. If you take a dryad too far away from the tree, or you cut down the tree, the dryad dies. And so I think I want to preserve that notion, right? That like if these are essentially stone dryads, then they are tied to the ore itself, and by mining the ore or separating the ore from the earth, it kills the Oread. I just feel like that's right. When the ore is extracted, it kills the Oread. But I agree, Alan. I feel like there's something to the, like, it needs to be a little more complicated than that, or the world has to interact with them in a slightly different way. Because again, that's just like a one-for-one replication of the Dryad, which is fine. But like, what's the unique twist here? What are we doing that's interesting? Again, I like the notion of them appearing as women because that's traditional, but I think that's also weird and gendered. So I don't think they have to necessarily be women, but I like the idea that they would appear to be beautiful, and that like almost a defense mechanism that they have is an attempt to convince these dwarves not to mine it, right? That like their thing is they bewitch you, you know, and try to like charm you out of mining it, right? Destruction of a novel or remarkable item. In recompense, the Oread provides the smith with materials drawn from the burning heart of the world, allowing the smith to create an even greater wonder. Could they be the spiritual manifestation of rock, or are they little folks made out of rock? I think they're the spiritual manifestation of rock. I think that's a better implication there. I think the little folks made out of rock is, again, Galeb-Dur. Which Galeb-Dur are traditionally elementals, but maybe we could make them fae, right? And kind of have them be little stone tricksters like that. And maybe there's a relationship between an Oread and a Galeb-Dur. Like, those things could be related, you know? I like them as the spiritual manifestation of rock. They appear in a bewitching form. And I think that's, you know, you can do a thing like a nymph where that's dependent on what the person perceiving them desires, right? Like, it's not, they don't have a set form, but they can choose to appear in a way that is, you know, appealing to the person they're trying to entice or bewitch, right? And attempt to persuade miners from extracting their precious ore. From extracting, which is it's like Tex-Mex, from extracting their precious life-giving ore. Which I think that's fine. I think it's, again, a little bit... It feels kind of on the nose. I want a little extra spin in there. So I'm still coming back to this idea of, like, can they be trapped? Right? Like, maybe there's a way to imprison one or capture one. Because that feels very Fae, right? Like, if you can trick it, or if you can, you know, beguile it back in some way, that allows you to mine the ore while keeping it alive. But I feel like it's unhappy, right? Like that has a great, like, fairy tale, you know, leprechaun kind of energy, which I think is right for doing them as fae. So how do they appear? They have no true physical form. Or maybe, like, their true physical form is more like an elemental, right? They don't normally, like, if you see them, yeah. Sorry, word vomit. Their true form is crude and made from stone and ore, but they can choose to glamour themselves. Oh god, the spelling. Oh god. Is glamour in this case, like, spelled differently? Because that's themselves however they wish, in whatever way is most appealing to the person they're attempting to beguile. Often called stone maidens for this reason. Miners will come back telling stories of a beautiful dwarven, like almost like an angel. That's interesting. Like, okay, so let's talk about religion for a second, right? Like, what if they are fae creatures? Ooh, I think I just busted this open. Yeah, yep. Kirk had it before I did. I mean, if you can kill a tree so a dryad can be killed, you can't kill a rock. But I think you can mine the ore out, right? I think if the ore is separated from the stone, you know, it's like pulling the roots out of the tree, essentially. Especially because the way that ore works in Khûm, right, is that it grows back. Like, you mine a certain amount of it, but as long as you leave, like, the veins, like the roots of the ore in there in the next season, it will kind of, like, regenerate. Avalanches and volcanic eruptions are... Oh, that's cool. Ooh. Megara's got an interesting touch. So two things I want to... Yes, there's a U in it. I thought there was a U. I do really like that, Jose. I think we're gonna... This sounds crazy. I think we're gonna save that also for Gale of Doors. I think the notion of a Gale of Door as being like a mischievous avalanche spirit is really cool. Yeah, I think Megara is absolutely right. Okay, so we're gonna combine these two things. So Glamour has a U. Thank you, Jose. Look at all these people. This is so cool. Like, we have like a real like quorum going in the chat. Normally it's, you know, 1 or 2 people, which is fun, but this is nice. We got like 5 or 6 people in here. Maybe not mining them kills them, but the actual smelting. Ooh, that's kind of cool. It's not the mining. So there's this notion of like you would mine the ore out, and then it's like pleading with you as you carry the ore, but it's the smelting. Yeah, that's neat. Okay. So here's one thing. I want to address Kirk's idea. I had this thought too. So let's talk about religion with dwarves. One of the most sacred gods to the dwarves is Ignon, who's the goddess of the earth, the mother goddess. The idea being that she created the earth, right, and gave her life to it. So I wonder if these maidens basically disguise themselves as Ignon, right? And they basically try to, rather than calling them stone maid, maybe we call them stone mothers, you know? And they basically like lie to the dwarves, and they say, you know, this ore is sacred and it must not be mined, and they try to like persuade them not to do it. And they use magic, right? It's like a charm, but they have discovered that if they pose themselves as Ignon, that that is more likely to get the dwarves to leave them alone, right? Like they have kind of co-opted. It's almost like appearing as the Virgin Mary right in front of them. And so these dwarven miners that encounter this will come back and talk about how Ignon appeared to them. But what's interesting about that is that Ignon has kind of a Muhammad-style religious practice where because she gave her life to create the earth, it is sort of considered sacrilegious to depict her. And so what I like is this like slight dogmatic hole in that story. If someone comes back claiming they saw the mother, then you could poke a hole in that by saying, well, what did she look like? No one knows what she looks like, right? It's almost blasphemous to say that you saw her face, because it's, you know, she gave up her life. So none of the dwarves, like long before any of the dwarves were made, she gave up her life to make the earth. So no one knows what she looks like, right? Yeah, that's really cool. I think Megara's idea is still definitely true. So if you can avoid like the enchantment and then you smelt the item, it can contain some of it if it's done properly. And then that's what, like, one of the ways you can make an enchanted item is that like you could get a sword that has an aureate in it. Ooh, what if that's like what an intelligent sword is in like I'm sure there are other ways to do it. Hey, what's up, Vaughn? Welcome. Okay, cool. I want to write that idea down. When smithed into magic into an item. Oh yeah, right. It's not the mining that kills them. The aureate dies not when the ore is extracted, but when the ore is smelted. Not when the ore is extracted, but instead when it's smelted. Yep. When smithed into an item and done properly. Sorry, the notes are very scattered. I apologize. The item created by an aureate's ore is inherently magical, or perhaps even sentient. Like it's the aureate's spirit inhabits the armor or the weapon or the whatever it is. So to me then, let's jump ahead a little bit. Let me scroll down so you guys can see a little bit more of what I have. But I definitely think that one of these hooks, of course, is one of the party members acquires an item possessed by an aureate. All these typos, you guys. I can barely see what I'm writing. But that seems like a really obvious one, right? Like they loot a sword from a dungeon and they discover that it's intelligent. It reminds me of, I think her name is like Fi or Fi from Skyward Sword, right? That it would have a spirit inside of it. Maybe it can even like manifest right in front of you. Could be kind of cool. What are some other hooks here, right? What are some other adventures that could come out of it? We can also talk about the aureate's history. Yeah, exactly. They can be burned off. And so you would have dwarves that would view them as being pests, right? They create the illusion of the mother. Yeah, that's cool, right? I think that's awesome. Yeah, and I think a lot of dwarves would view that as like, oh, that's an Oread, don't worry about that. But there would be other dwarves, you know, that would view that as being a blessing, or you would want to try to contain it. Like, it's the dwarves aren't 100% of whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because I could also see, like, if the Oread is like, maybe you have to get the Oread to agree or something like that, right? Because I could see an item that is like, that if you don't care about it and you just smelt the item, then maybe the item's cursed, right? It's like about persuading the Oread, like, inhabit my sword, you know, lend me your strength, and that's why they become magical. Because that also feels super, super fey to me. That, like, the process to do it properly is to persuade the Oread, right? But if you don't purge it, then maybe you will accidentally make the item cursed. Yeah, what is their motivation? That's interesting. I have no idea. I think they would have individual motivations based on the bargains they originally struck with the dwarves that made the items, right? So if I convinced this Oread to inhabit my sword, it might be that, like, okay, this is very basic, but the sword, you know, would be used to defend the earth from unnatural creatures or something like that, right? And then that is the sword's purpose. Like, whatever the original bargain that was struck is now tied up in the sentient, right? All iron that is made into magical weapons. It could be. I don't know if they're that common. I think maybe it's all items that are made, all iron that's made into magical, into intelligent items are, right? At least from this part of the world. Yeah, I think that's cool. Okay. I want to add that convincing thing. You must convince the Oread to inhabit the item. You can attempt to burn it away in the smelter. That's what that's called. I don't know. But there's always a chance it might survive. It might survive and curse the item you've made. These are going to be very messy notes. I apologize. As a sentient item, its motivation is tied to the bargain it struck with the original smith who tied it. Who bound it, maybe. Who bound it. Let's see. So, some other hooks. I want to talk about the history. So, I feel like for a long time, I think through most of Dwarven history, the dwarves didn't know you could do this. Right? Like, they just saw visions of the mother and were frightened by her and then stopped mining it. So I think that was largely true for Dwarven history, I think. And then only relatively recently, maybe in the last couple hundred years before the Sorrows, did they realize, hey, actually, this isn't a religious experience, it's like an arcane experience. Because the dwarves are also very, very primitive in their understanding of arcane magic, you know? For much of Dwarven history, the Oread was a folktale to dwarves who believed it wholeheartedly. Now they understand the creatures better. Yes, yeah, Kirk's right. Bargains would be very fey. Basically a pact, I think that. Could a crazy necro dwarf have created a magical Oread forge? They purify metals magically, but they are that's cool. That's interesting. A hook could be that there are some dwarves who want to treat these ore veins where some Oread live as sacred, and there's a separate group of dwarves who want to use. Yeah, there's like two groups that are like, yeah, that's great. It is called the smelter. Thank you, Christopher. I appreciate that. Two factions of dwarves disagree about whether to mine a particular vein of ore. One believes that's not a dash, that's just a period. One believes the vein to be sacred. The other wants to make magic items. Because I like that like they're both, that like the one that's saying we should preserve the ore because it's inhabited by the mother is wrong. Oops, sorry, you guys can't read that. like they're incorrect in the sense that it is not inhabited by the mother, but they are like sort of taking the good character side, like don't mind this thing, you know, it's precious. Whereas the people who are correct are sort of the greedier, like we want to turn it into items, you know, which is like that's interesting because it's just morally gray, like who's in the right, who's in the wrong. This is a really simple one, but like miners return from the depths, telling tales of, you know, the mother below. Yeah, great. Thank you, Christopher. Sorry about that. So yes, definitely a pact, definitely a bargain, and I could see that the pact like going wrong, or there's maybe like stories about like, yes, you can make a sentient item out of this, but the item always kind of finds its way back into the earth or something like that, right? Like I can see there being kind of folk tales about that's always a dangerous bargain. Maybe not for you, maybe for your descendants or something like that. Yeah, some strings attached. That's cool. I dig it. Yes, definitely. Yeah, that's great. You're exactly right. Vaughn says, "Are you going to use the charm mechanic for the Oread?" Yeah, I think it definitely has. Like, I'll just look at the nymph for the Dryad and then try to convert that over. So let's talk about their history a little bit. We have some good hooks, a lot of cool description. So during ancient history, again, they were kind of. I think it took a long time for dwarves to sort of realize how that worked, right? When the Seven Sorrows happened, the dwarves fled Khûm en masse, right? And Yogg's influence kind of crept up, and was, you know, troglodytes are spreading, the sacrosteel around beneath Khûm is weakening, things like that. What I tend to do with monsters in this time is pretty obvious that like they multiplied because they were unchecked by dwarves. But I don't necessarily know that there is a direct one-to-one correlation. That's a good question, UberQ. The initial party is meant to be entirely dwarves. Yeah, I want to have 6. This is 2 parties of 3 main characters, and I want to have all of those 6 be dwarves, but then have guests who come in could potentially play whatever they want, right? But I like the idea of the core knot of party of players being dwarves, just because it grounds them more in like the history and the lore, and you know they probably have familiar relations and stuff like that. Like if this is a campaign largely about what it means to be a dwarf and like what dwarven civilization looks like, you know, if every like I'm a dragonborn, I'm a tabaxi, like okay, then you don't care about any of this. So the notion is to try to ground it. Hopefully the players are down for that. If not, we'll figure it out. But the intention is, yes, they are dwarves. So yeah, I like that. You could have party members who think one way and think the other way. So my question is like, what happened to them during the Seven Sorrows? Like a lot is going on in the Sorrows, right? The land is blanketed in infinite winter, and this is interesting. Yeah, okay, I got it. So because they are one of the first things that happens in the Seven Sorrows is that the veins essentially go dry. So the notion in Khûm is that, as I mentioned, like the minerals will replenish themselves magically every year, almost like crops, right? So that's how they're able to be so wealthy. So as the like veins dry up, I think it creates like the Oreads become rare and rare, and they basically go extinct, right? The Oread, the Oreads, or as the veins dry up, the Oreads vanish, right? Dwarven sort of soothsayers speak of this as a dire omen, kind of like birds, you know, before a storm, that like all of a sudden no one has seen an Orion in years. No one has seen an Oread, sorry, in years. I've been playing too much Eberron. I'm saying Orion. But then what happens is that in the present day, 500 years passes, and the dwarves abandon Khûm and are gone for all that time. When the campaign begins, we've discovered that the veins have replenished themselves like tenfold. There's tons of extra minerals down there, and now it's this super wealthy place again, and dwarves and humans and merchants and miners are all rushing back to Khûm to take advantage of this. So now I think there are tons of Oreads. Like it's hard to find veins without them, right? Oreads are more common now than they ever were. Some clans see this as a blessing, right? Some as a nuisance, because they're kind of in the way, right, of mining the goods. Okay. Oreads could have pivoted from impersonating the dwarven gods to something else. When the dwarves returned, they realized they'd gotten played for centuries, and they started oh, that's interesting. Did you mention of Yogg corrupting Oreads? Yeah, that's cool too. Spirits of dead dwarven maidens who bound themselves to the ore in an effort to endure. They could be. We kind of talked about them if they're fey creatures, that they're more like almost like magically irradiated ghosts. Like they're fey in Undune, come from areas of high concentration of arcane magic. A lot of these ideas are cool. Oreads could have pivoted from impersonating the dwarven gods to something else. When the dwarves returned, they realized they'd gotten played for centuries. Well, what's interesting about that is that they didn't. No one is mining during that period, right? Like, but it does make sense to me that the Oreads would not impersonate the goddess anymore, because there have been no dwarves for 500 years. So that makes sense. Let me put a couple notes there. So, do they still impersonate? They still impersonate the goddess, even though there were no dwarves for 500 years? Did Yogg corrupt any of the Oreads? I'm trying not to tie too many elements to Yogg. Like, I think that's cool. I'm not opposed to it, but it's that, like, I like the notion that all great threats in Undune could kind of eventually worm their way back to Yogg. But I don't think Yogg is a huge element of this campaign. Yogg's there, and Yogg created some of the troubles. But I think it's more about the individual struggles of Khûm than it is about. So I'm always a little bit hesitant to tie everything to Yogg. But I think if it's like a thin tendril, you know, maybe there's a couple of these corrupted Oreads. That's cool to me as well. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I like the idea of the Oread imitating dwarven ways. But I think there's something cool about what form would they take after 500 years of no dwarves. And again, no mining. Like, no one is really... The troglodytes don't mine. The goblins are basically wiped out by the troglodytes, right? But I think that's a cool idea, Alan. I want to iterate on that. So let's do threats. I think it's bewitchment, right? Or beguilement. While an Oread might fight to defend its ore, its chief powers are those of charm and enchantment. Enchantment. Boy, oh, you guys. Oh no. It's chief powers. Okay. Yeah, that, like, it's more likely to charm you than it is to necessarily attack you, right? That's kind of the real threat of an Oread. Cool, I like that. That's really cool. Obviously, it needs to be organized and kind of cleaned up to make it look prettier. But I think that's cool. Okay, I want to talk about Gale of Doers next. It does really sound like a Star Wars character. I think I named a Star Wars character in our Western game, Galeb with a G. So, yeah, there you go. Let me take the Oread off the list. That makes Odiug number 19 and Paraton number 20. I'm gonna get a little gulp of water. Yeah, I was doing a voice in our what was I gonna say, in our Sharn campaign today, like sort of a Tom Waits kind of a. That was almost a little Bill the Butcher in there, but like very rough and scratchy, and it's like really just messed up my voice today. So I apologize if I do not have a very smooth vocal quality. Okay, Gale of Doer. So the Gale of Doer I know a little bit better. It was a 4th edition monster, as far as I remember, and it's basically just like an animate boulder. I'm just gonna go up here to G. Gelatinous cube, stone giants. Stone giants are also another like walking rock creature because we have tons of them. Stone giants are very interesting though. We'll cover that another day. Frost giants, fire giants, giant elk, giant eagles, flumps. So it's gonna be in between flumps and Gale of Doer. Flumps are also really fun. The idea is that they feed on, traditionally they feed on negative emotion. So the plot that I have with the flumps is that they are drawn to Yogg. So the deeper you get into the Underdark of Khûm, there's more and more flumps because they're feeding off of Yogg's negative energy, and they have a tendency, but they can like nullify negative emotions because they feast on them. So they're these extremely friendly, like weird squid creatures, but like they're drawn to areas of great evil and darkness and corruption. So I like that idea that like you're down there and like, oh man, everything's all twisted and corrupted, and then there's these like very friendly, hello, these friendly flumps floating around. So the Gale of Dur. It is an elemental. I'm not sure exactly how it is like described. I might even just go get my actual monster manual and read that and see what they say. But I was really digging Alan's and Jose's ideas about them essentially being little like fey tricksters. I could see that they're fey sort of in the same way that a stone mother is, but whereas an Oread is tied to yeah, I don't have any redesign for these guys. That's fine. Hooks, threats. Yeah, plasticity is a threat that the flump has, is that it can make a combat. Basically, they can calm your aggressive actions, so it makes combats weird because they have an aura that makes you not want to fight anyone. So if you're trying to like fight these troglodytes and the flump is following you around, and it just makes everyone chill with everybody else. Just think that amuses me. Let me get my monster manual. I'll be back in like 2 shakes. But the idea, right, is that the Gale of Dur is, rather than an elemental. Here we go. Rather than an elemental, the Gale of Dur is a fey. I think it's actually kind of cool. And then Gale of Dur could be a catch-all term for basically any fey that's made of rocks instead of wood or whatever. If the Oread is like minerals and precious ores, then the Gale of Dur could be stone, right? So let me just see how they describe them in the book. Oh, the flump. Okay, boulder-like creatures, stubby appendages. So yeah, they kind of do them as they're natives to the elemental plane of Earth, which again we don't have. But it's powerful magic, allows the spellcaster to summon one. Some Gale of Dur form naturally in places touched by that plane. So kind of like what we're talking about, right? If Fae are kind of irradiated creatures, like irradiated by magic. Is imbued with greater intelligence than most elementals, allowing it to better assess threats. Okay. Stone Guardian, a Gale of Dur doesn't age or require sustenance. That makes sense. Powerful druid might charge a Gale of Dur with protecting a stone circle or a sacred hilltop. Yeah, they're just kind of rock people, but they don't have any like desires or anything like that. They're just sort of like boring, right? So I think the notion of kind of recasting them as like weird tricksters is neat. Okay, cool. Thank you, Jose. Yeah, Leander is tough, right? That's Vaughn's character has a similar growl, so we were like growling at each other today. Yeah, they're the friendliest creatures. I don't think they don't work for Yogg. They're just drawn to Yogg and Yogg areas because they feed on negative emotion. I think they're like perfectly nice. But yeah. So I like Alan was talking about them being kind of like stone little animate rocks, right? Stone tricksters, fey, tricksters, fey created from stone rather than wood or flesh. Because I can also see like with fey, right, that like a red cap or a spriggan or something could just be a halfling or a gnome that's been exposed to too much magic and it kind of warps their thinking and like their lifespan and stuff like that, right? You know? Yes, I completely agree, Alan. Yeah, some have big old bellies, some are long and tall. Yeah, you're exactly right. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, they possess any rock around them as extra appendages. Yeah, I agree, Alan. That's kind of how I do goblins too. Like I don't really say that they're. I like the idea that like a bugbear is just a big goblin. Like that's not really a word. And even a hobgoblin is just like a smart goblin. I don't really do the different subspecies. Yeah, goblin is a non-standard form factor as you described. Yeah, you're exactly right. A catch-all term for boulder-like creatures. No standard appearance. Can be as large as a boulder or as small as gravel. Oh gosh, sorry. Boulder-like creatures. Gravel. I liked the can draw other stones to them, other smaller stones. To them as appendages. Okay, so I liked Jose's idea of them kind of like dancing before the avalanche, you know, has a cool thing. I don't know if they would dance in sort of a like fey naiad way, but I do like the notion of them being almost like avalanche spirits. Like they cause landslides and mudslides, not necessarily out of like anything malicious, you know, but sort of out of a playful, impish, trickster-like nature. You know what I mean? Playful and impish. They are none the less very dangerous because they don't understand how fragile non-rock created creatures are. Like they don't get flesh. They don't understand why an avalanche could hurt someone, right? Oop, Vaughn's got a crazy idea. Oh wow, that's almost like too it's like too dark almost. It's cool. Honestly, like it might be good to save something like that because I feel like the tone here is a little different, but the notion of like an obsidian elemental that could somehow like, you know, capture someone's personality is kind of neat. And we do have a bunch of other like weird stone creatures. Yeah, that's cool, Alan. I was thinking about that, like doing let me write that down though for you, Vaughn. Made from obsidian. I think Vaughn, I feel like that might be an Oriad thing. You know, if it's more about their reflective metal than it is about theirs, because I think these guys are boulders, right? Like I think that kind of mental magical thing feels more like an Oriad power. I'm gonna go write that under Oriad. I like the idea. I just don't know if it fits for Gilibdur. Sorry, we'll come back. I like that they have that, like, there's a type of ooze, I think, that if you deal enough damage to it, it splits into smaller ones, right? I think they could have a similar ability. Different Oriads of different ores have different powers. In the same way that, like, a river naiad is probably different from a dryad, right? Different powers. An obsidian one can reflect your own personality back on you. Yeah, I think that's cool. I just think it fits better with their kind of mental, magical, more spiritual nature. I think Gilibdur are very physical. You know, there's all about stone and bone and rolling and destruction and thunder. You know. Yeah, I think it works for Orion. It is a crazy idea. But I don't want to dismiss crazy ideas are good. You just got to find the right place for them. Yeah, they don't understand how non-fragile sort of a rock related creature is, and so I think they like to kind of play silly games, right? They play silly games on people. Like I could see like an encounter where I'm gonna write this under hook. A Gilibdur tosses a boulder at the party and shouts, "Catch." Right? Not in a like an ironic way, but like he wants to play catch with them, but it's throwing a massive boulder that nobody could possibly catch. You know what I mean? Like I think they have this kind of warped, childlike sort of, again, this impish nature. Like I think they like to ride avalanches, you know, because they're sort of fun, right? It's like skateboarding for them essentially. Interesting. They arrange and throw rocks around. Yeah, I could see that. Break into pebbles to create an armor so the flesh ones don't get hurt by them. Oh, that's neat. Like they could around somebody. That'd be kind of cool. Play silly games on people, not understanding. Oh, we already have that, yeah. Ones that could easily get them. Play silly games on people. They love avalanches and can and enjoy riding them like tidal waves, right? Like they're surfing. They can animate rocks and boulders, and I think that they do have that ability, but it's less that they can like move them with telekinesis, and it's more that they can turn a boulder, they can like awaken a boulder, which I think maybe we remove that ability and we instead say that they can like basically use telekinesis to manipulate stones and boulders and whip them around, right? Like I think that's kind of cool. Yeah, they do have a rolling charge thing, so they can like charge at you and roll up, right? I might also give them a giant style throwing rocks ability. So let me put a redesign thing on here. Y'all can see that. Redesign. In place of animate boulders, they instead have a telekinetic, like, animate rocks ability, or like animate objects, you know, like they can, if they don't like give sentience to boulders, they can just, you know, manipulate items. Maybe manipulate stones. That only works on stones and rocks. Yeah, I think that's cool. Reminds me of the pink monsters from Labyrinth. If they have no physical needs, then their main gig would just be entertaining. Yes, you're exactly right. Yep, Alan's got it. With no physical needs, they instead only care about entertaining themselves. I like that. Oh, interesting. Okay, let me read all these. That's kind of funny, Alan. Yeah. Reminds me of the pink monsters, says Jose, from Labyrinth, that could take off their heads off as they try to take the girls' heads. Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, they don't understand, like, oh, your arm hurts? Take it off. Like, what's the problem? They don't get it. With their preteen Earth Elementals, attention deficit disorder. Yeah, funny. You can appease them with music. Yeah, they're like, maybe that's like the trick, right? They're susceptible to music. If one is broken in two, then both the new ones have their memory erased, so they forget about whatever hostilities. That's kind of funny. They have a weakness for music. If one is split into both of the new halves, remember, like, have new memories, or like have their memories wiped so they forget why they were fighting. So silly. I think that's something that happens, yeah, so let me put that in redesign. There's one, and then another one is like when they take, when they're bloodied, right? Like they split in half. They split in half into two new boulders. Okay. Yeah, we need 2 more hooks. Something about the music seems cool. We also needed their history. So again, kind of like an Oread, it feels like they would have been around for a long time, but it doesn't feel like there's any kind of like any memories or any like not memories. Sorry, I was thinking about the the splitting. It doesn't seem like there would be any like spiritual history, right? Like not like the Oread has all this religious significance to that, to the dwarves, but I don't feel like the Gale of Dur does. I mean, obviously to me it seems like they would just be a pest, right? Not necessarily hostile, but sort of unintentionally hostile, right? Their aggro is reset. Yeah, there you go, Vaughn. You got it. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything huge about it. I'm trying to think of like interesting hints. So sometimes it doesn't work. Or sometimes a monster like the Hook Horror there's not a lot to say. You know, either it like there are periods where there are more of them or less of them, but that's kind of all you can say about it. I'd like to have a historical context for them, but we can also think about hooks, right? Like, what are some other adventures involving Gale of Doors? Like, it seems like you kind of want to do an avalanche, right? A dwarven village wants to remove the Gale of Door pests from their minds. That's definitely clear. Let's see. Because to me, they feel more like they're on the mountainside than they're underground. Like, they could certainly exist underground, but I kind of like them on the slopes a little better. A dwarven mind is like terrorized by Gale of Door. Like, I think something about a Gale of Door invites the party to ride an avalanche with them. One that proves massively destructive to the surrounding area, right? That it's like, yo, dudes, like, I'm going down this slope, man. It's gonna be sick. And they're like, you have to persuade the Gale of Door, like, not to do that. Like, hey, there's a caravan down there, right? As the Galeb are thought of mythical creatures, they think dwarves are fairy tales. So one tries to take the players to its friends to show them. Oh, interesting. Like, they also think of dwarves as being fake. Yeah, that's part of the history, for sure. The Galeb Dur didn't believe in dwarves. So I kind of think they're just on the surface, right? Short, hairy creatures that lived underground. And were astonished when the dwarves first surfaced. Right? Because a lot of the dwarves spent like most of their sort of prehistory underground. So I like the idea that like part of it is that the Gale of Dur like had heard stories, right? They encountered dwarves in passing, and it took a long time for them to like acknowledge that they were real. Like, that's kind of funny. Yeah, I think some iteration of Vaughn's idea of like the dwarves are pestered by them, right? Like I like the idea of like a Gale of Dur who, like a massive Gale of Dur, plants himself a massive Gale of Dur. Ooh. Well. A mountain is nothing but an enormous sleeping Gale of Dur. Right? And it awakens. Maybe we talked about there being like an intelligent mountain or whatever, but yeah, I like that a lot. There's 2 D's there. So, Seven Sorrows. So something happened around that time. I mean, the winter fell, right, on them. I assume they wouldn't have any concern about that. Maybe like Gale of Durs are more active in winter, since they love to play in the snow. And thus avalanches were common around the Sorrows, because the winter lasted all year, right? yeah, that's cool. Yes. They've forgotten about the dwarves completely, and they tell stories about the people that made all these things. Yep. Since many were broken in the Sorrows. Yeah, that's great. That's so good, Vaughn. In the Sorrows. And they tell stories about the strange creatures who built. Because there's like huge statues and broken bridges and stuff everywhere. Who once lived here. Yep. I love that. Cool. Yeah, the Gale of Dur. So the threat, I think, is it's I don't want to say combat. I kind of like damage or destruction. While a Gale of Dur is rarely malicious, they what is they sow rampant good-natured destruction in their wake. You know, like, they'll deal damage, they'll hurt you, but it will all be accidental. Yeah, they're deeply forgetful. Yeah, no thoughts, head empty. Yeah, you're exactly right. They're just running around. Yeah, they tell stories about the scary, because like they shape rock, right? Look at what they've done, and it's like, if you're made of rock and you see like the statue that somebody made, like, it's basically someone made it like a grisly statue out of bone, right? Like, they're terrified of that. I think that's kind of cool. I don't think that they're like, if they were smart, they could organize and like try to fight the dwarves, but they don't care. They're just too dumb. They don't care. Yeah, profoundly forgetful. Because it also feels like the opposite of what you would assume with a rock. That like a rock would live forever and would remember everything. I think they do live for almost an impossibly long time, but they just have a tendency to break because rocks break over it. They crack or plants grow in between them and they forget everything, right? Like, yeah. Deeply forgetful, I think is a good way to phrase that, Alan. Forgetful. Cool, I love that. Great, that's the Gale of Dur. We have about 45 minutes left. I think it was Christopher or maybe Megara. Somebody said they wanted to talk about the Metal Master. Yeah, they assume that's the worst that can happen. Oh, well, that's fine. That's great. Yeah, they'll just crack in half and lose your memory. It'll be okay. They think the worst that will happen to someone. God. Is that they'll break in half and lose their memory. Because I think that they think they're a new person, right? They're a new Gale of Dur now. They might even have, I don't know if they have names, but they don't think of themselves like, I forgot everything. They're just like, oh, they're born. Hello, who are you? Right? Like, yeah, so silly. I think it's also good to, like, to have a good mix of like scary and like profound and silly monsters, you know? You gotta have all these different sort of tones. Cool, let's take the Gale of Dur off the list. Nice job, guys. And then let's do the Metal Master. So I'm gonna have to look this one up because I don't really remember it, but I do know that it's a crazy slug. I think I might have a hit on it if I'm remembering the Metal Master correctly. Something we talked about last week might there might be a good connection here. So let me come up with a Metal Master. Oops, Metal Master. It probably has a dwarven name, but we don't have to get into that. That's fine. Okay. 3. Yeah, this is fun. I really like doing this. Is one of my favorite ones to do. Because it's less about like come up with a great new idea, and it's more about like reiterate an existing idea. You know, if it was like come up with a bunch of monsters, which honestly, once we get through the list, it might be kind of fun to do a few sessions of just like brainstorming new monster ideas that aren't established monsters, you know? Okay, so let me look up the Metal Master, because I don't remember it very well. Metal Master 5e. Well, I don't know if it's 5e, but D&D. They're slugs. I think they like attract metal to them. It is, yeah, it is also known as a sword slug. The Metal Master was a carnivore that could magnetically attract, repulse, and crudely manipulate metal objects. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know. The rays of metal shards stuck to their body formed additional armor for the creature. Sorry, I might have a little bit of lag as I'm looking at this thing. Yeah, okay. So, to me, then, the Metal Master... Yeah, it's a Guitar Hero achievement for sure. Also called the Sword Slug. So, okay, a little background. We talked about this a little bit last time, but in Khûm, there are a number of rare magical minerals and materials that don't exist anywhere else in the world, right? The dwarves think of them as gifts that were given to them by the Earth Goddess. One of them is called lodestone, and it's basically like a magnetic, a naturally conductive magnetic mineral. So one of the clans, Clan Lodestone, uses it in their crafting, right? They're famous for their phalanx, which basically is like, you know, their shields can magnetically clang together and hold against tremendous pressure. So last week when we were designing caves for like underground locations for Khûm, I think it was Alan who had the idea to do like basically a magnetic cave, like a cave where, you know, there's particular minerals or whatever that attracts metal to it. So it feels to me like there's no way you don't find some connection between these two things. I don't understand why it's a carnivore. Again, it seems to me to make more sense that it would in some way feed on the lodestone or something like that. But I do like the idea of it as like a giant metallically armored snail. You know, I mean, yeah, think of it as like a giant slug that eats lodestone. Or that feeds on lodestone, and that makes it naturally magnetic. Isn't that crazy? It's such a weird monster. But that was part of my challenge, was like not to turn down any monster idea that came up on Underground Mountain or Tundra. Whatever it was, I put it in because like I liked the notion of saying I want them all here, and if I have to kind of rework them, that's fine. But I didn't like the idea of being like, that idea is not good enough. Like, any idea I can do, I wanted the challenge of it, you know? And is thus magnetic. Hunks of metal affix to its body, giving the creature a strange like husk. So what's so fascinating about that is that like if it's only metal, if it's not necessarily like rock or even like unprocessed ore, the notion of seeing one, right, that it would just be this like amorphous blob of like items. Maybe they're rusted and crappy and it would be really noisy, like across the ground, right, as it like moves around. And I like that it's like maybe you make a mechanic where the higher its AC is, the slower it is, because it's like, you know, it depends on how much metal it has stuck to it, right? You can see them at different stages. If it has very little metal, then it's like kind of slick and moves around almost more like a serpent. But the more metal that it draws, the slower and more ponderous it gets, right? They like iron and blood. That's interesting. You could do that. But I kind of like them being, I kind of like them being like not dangerous to people, right? Like they're dangerous again, I think, because they will steal your equipment, you know, of metal. They might defend that metal if it sticks to them, right? If you come over and try to grab armor, they might turn and fight you. But I like the idea that they don't eat meat, because how could they, right? Like, I don't know if it's out of a forbidden experiment. They also, like, the dwarves don't really do that. They don't really like do arcane experiments. That's not really a thing that they're about. They can do some stuff like elementals and things. I kind of think it's cooler if it's just a weird fucking animal that eats lodestone, and that normally it wouldn't be a big deal, but it's only when the dwarves like came down into the cavern, started making stuff, that like stuff would start to stick to it, right? Like, yeah, husk of metal objects adhered to its body. I'm thinking of the sea cucumbers in BioShock, right? Like it's naturally occurring, but it lives in the deepest parts of the earth, and so it's just weird, you know? Like, I think there's something cool about this is a fucked up monster that, like, because again, so many monsters like wizards experiment, the owl bear, you know, and even the elemental and stuff like that. Like, I think that's something cool about it being a natural creature that is just really strange. When not burdened by metal plates, it is slow and ponderous. Ponderous. Ponderous, but, you know, difficult to harm. When naked, it's swift and slick and troublesome. Yeah, I mean, it feels, that's kind of more under description. Yeah. It feeds on the lodestone. It feeds on the lodestone, making it again, another pest, a pest to dwarven miners because they want it, right? Because they don't want it to eat the lodestone. It's iron plus electricity. Maybe this creature produces. Yeah, I was gonna say maybe it shocks you, right? Ooh, Megara. Maybe they used to be small creatures that were domesticated and used to pick up scraps and stuff. That's really cute, like little slugs going around the workshop picking up scrap metal. Oh, like can it like go amorphous? I don't think it doesn't like. I don't think it takes the metal into its body. I think the metal just like adheres to its sticky skin, you know? I think Megara's got it. I think they got really fucking humongous. Ooh, I like that Uberq. Yeah, okay, cool. Feeds upon the lodestone, but yeah, okay. And was once domesticated by dwarves to pick up so they were used to like clean up the workshops and stuff. Metal pieces, metal shavings, metal scraps. And they would like feed them tiny little like morsels of lodestone to keep them magnetic. Yeah. Over time, it slowly dissolves the metal attached to it. So it must keep moving to attach more. A small amount of static electricity. So there's a plot point that I don't want to talk about because it's a spoiler, but the big clan that mines this stuff, lodestone, is gone. They basically never come back from Khûm. They never come back to Khûm. I mean, like at the when all the other clans come back, like the only elder clan that doesn't answer the summons, apart I guess from the True Silvers who vanished. But Clan Lodestone doesn't either. So that really works out for me if they had these little guys and they were running around. And since they didn't come back, they've just been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now they're a huge problem. So like when they're small, there's a tiny amount of static electricity there. Static electricity. Static. But now that they've gotten to be enormous, now they can shoot you with lightning, right? Like they're just this aura of static electricity around them. I think that's cool. Yeah, I totally agree. They originally ate iron fillings. Yeah, fillings and shavings and like little stuff that was kind of around. Yeah, I think they eat the lodestone, but then they move around the metal and pull it all in. Yep. Okay, great. So once small domesticated insects trained by Clan Lodestone to collect metal shavings and iron fillings, like little purple Roombas. I think they're purple. I think they're bright purple, like little purple Roombas. That's so cute, little slugs. When Clan Lodestone vanished, the Metal Masters, and I like they call them Metal Masters, like the little guys, right? Like it's like a diminutive, right? Like little master, Metal Master. Metal Masters grew and grew and grew and are now enormous creatures slugging around the Underdark, slugging around the Stoneway. Yep. Oh, that's sure. And I think that's in the present day. With no clan lodestone. Keep them in check. Yeah, and again, like a lot of these monsters, I think that's like one encounter. Right, like we see this one time in the campaign that they even go in that area. Yeah, they eat the lodestone. Yep. Oh, sure. Do they eat each other? Ooh, that's cool. Yeah. They eat each other. So, like, I like the idea that they would predate on each other because maybe what they eat the lodestone to make themselves magnetic, and then the stuff sticks to them, and then they, like, absorb it through their skin. So, if they see another metal master, right, that has more metal than them, they would go and they would try to attack it and kill it to basically kill its, to stop it from sucking in the metal and then eat all of its, like, half-digested metal. Yep. They eat lodestone like a chicken with a gizzard. Not to feed on it, but to absorb its magnetic power. Yeah, I mean, a hook is an enormous one. Has eaten an entire vein of lodestone, and you know, yeah, I mean, it's super magnetic. You can't get anywhere near it. Two metal masters clash with one another, attempting to steal their opponent's metal. So a redesign, I want to give them like a lightning blast. I mean, honestly, they don't exist in 5th, I don't think. Maybe they're in Tome of Foes, I've not seen it. Redesign, I can't spell. Give them an electrical blast. Yeah, that's cool. There can only be one. Yeah, they would. That's cool. Let's get one more hook. So, enormous one has eaten an entire vein of lodestone. So this is a big fucking massive guy. Two metal masters. Oh yeah. What about like a metal master? Oh, but it slowly dissolves it, so they don't exist in 5e. Okay. Oh, there used to be a bunch of little ones. And now there's just one huge one. That's cool. I kind of want there to be more than just one, but I think that's maybe the case with the really, really big one, right? What about like we kind of have this before, but the notion of like a character in metal armor gets caught on one and is slowly digested, right? Oh sure, someone started selling them as pets. Yeah, maybe that's the hook. There's a demand for metal master like larvae in the new dwarven holds, so then it's like go catch them and sell them, right? Yeah, trouble with tribbles. That's cool. Ooh. Okay, I want to take a couple of these down. Like, there's a magic item. Yep. There's a valuable magic item. God damn it. Stuck to one. Magic resists the metal masters. Acidic. Like, what is that? What is that term? Like, oh god. Membrane. Oh yeah. Whoa. That's gross. They're considered a delicacy. Who would think they're a delicacy? It feels like golden plate. Like clan golden plate. Okay, great. So threat, I think, is impoverishment again. Impoverishment. While a large metal master is a deadly combatant. Their magnetic aura is their real danger. Threatening to steal your equipment. Right, like they can take your cool items. Because I think they could pull a magic item to it if it's made of metal, but it can't eat through it. Oops, yeah, sorry, let me scroll down. Great, cool, that's already 3. We still have a half an hour. Let's do another one. Cool, Metal Master is done. So Metal Master is out of here. That gives us the mustard jelly and the ochre jelly, who I will probably combine into one. Let me finish this. Oop, that should be 18. $20 for the piercer. Okay, so here are 20 or 30 some options. Scroll up a little bit for y'all. Okay, Aboleth, Black Pudding, Cave Bear, Cave Fisher, Chagrin, Dark Mantle, Drogazar, which is the giant bat, Gargoyle, Gas Spore, Geonid, Nell Beetle, Koatua, Lava Child, Mephit, Mustard Jelly, Ochre Jelly, Odiug, Paraton, Piercer, Quaggoth, Roper, Rust Monster, Spitting Crawlers, Tear, Troll, Warg, Winterhag, Jorn, Yakfolk, and Zaratan. Zaratan we might not be able to do because I think that's somewhere else, so I'm going to take Zaratan off of there. But yeah, do we have any preferences here? We only have a half an hour, so let's maybe not do any of the really big ones. I think Aboleth and Koatua are probably big enough that I don't really want to delve into any of those. But is there another one on here that seems interesting? I have some ideas for the Dark Mantle. I have some basic ideas for the Mephit. That's not particularly too interesting. I have some ideas for the Odiug, but that's about it in terms of concepts that I already have. The Cave Fisher also has some stuff, but do we have a preference? We could do the Troll, the Stone Ground Mustard Jelly. Yeah, we could do Trolls. Trolls are interesting. Anybody object to Trolls? They're a little complex, but I think we can bang a Troll out real quick. Or try to. Purple Worm, Troglodyte. It would be after Troglodyte. Yeah, it would be the furthest one down. Let's take this. I need to fill out Purple Worms and Umber Hulks, but they're also very interesting. Okay, so the Troll. So the mythological origin of Ondune's trolls are kind of strange. So I have to kind of go back. But basically, they were a race of giants way back in the beginning of time. Giants were the first like sentient people that the dwarves, not the dwarves, that the gods made, excuse me. And they were given sort of specific instructions not to delve too deep, right? Not to dig under the earth and look for what was down there, which was of course Yogg. But Yogg managed to persuade one of the clans to do that, to start to dig down there and investigate. When the gods came back, they were, none too pleased. And so because Yogg had promised them eternal life, the gods cursed the trolls to have eternal life, which is their regenerative power. But the flavor with trolls in Ondune is that is excruciatingly painful for them to regenerate, right? They live forever, but trolls are like constantly, endlessly racked by this like terrible agony. So that's kind of the core conceit of them as they exist in the world. Like they're immortal-ish, right? But they're like basically driven mad by their pain. Trolls are descendants, but look, how they work in Khûm is a conversation we can have right now, of the ancient giants that Yogg once tempted, cursed to live forever. Their regenerative powers keep them in perpetual agony, which drives them mad. Yeah, that's basically all I have so far. Poupon Jelly is a snotty ooze with an outrageous accent. Yeah, I don't know what a spitting crawler is. We'll have to try that one of these other times. We're kind of in trolls already. Puddings and jellies are cool. I have a lot of those. We're gonna have to figure out how some of those work. I feel bad. Everyone suggested something different. I'm sorry I went with the troll. It was the first one I saw. Okay, Christopher. And you recommended hook horror originally. We couldn't do that. So let's stick here with the trolls. So that's the conceit, right? Is that they're just like constantly tormented and kind of staggering around, right? And mad. Funny. I kind of think of them as being like Grendel in that really bad Ray Winstone Beowulf movie, where he's like shrieking and confused and like doesn't know what's going on. I think that's very much the energy of trolls in this setting. as opposed to having them be kind of like the classic dim-witted Hobbit trolls or the Lord of the Rings like big, you know, brute trolls. They are big and they are strong. They're giants, but they are, the reason they have no like society or culture anymore is that they're just in perpetual agony. So what is going on? We're in a very cold climate. You know, do we have different kinds of trolls? Are they like adapted to different climates? That feels kind of weird to me, but I guess they could be. They're very, very, very old, so it's not, you know, outside the realm of possibility. But like their skin is all like scabrous, right? And like peeling and terrible. They're kind of like lepers almost. Their skin is scabrous and peeling, much like a leper's. They howl in pain and stalk the edges of the wilderness. They are strong, yes, and powerful, but they are undiscerning in their attacks, consumed with pain, I guess. Consumed with agony, yeah. Which is, it's a little metal, right? Oh, there goes my wife, and she's making dinner. Sorry if it's noisy. Ooh, are they not allowed to sleep? Perpetually hungry. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think it's like, I don't know about hunger, because I think hunger to me is very associated with what was I gonna say? Yeah, it's definitely scars on scars on scars. I think hunger is the hill giant, right? It's kind of, we talked about that. That's sort of the hill giants thing, is that all they do is hunger all the time. Hill giants are once devoted to Moot, the god of constitution. They follow the Yar, who's the fattest member, and think of nothing but their next meal and occasionally their own survival. You know, they're only concerned with eating. So I feel like trolls are a little different. Are they trying to like ease the pain? You know? Can they die a non-violent death, or do they have to be killed? I think they have to be killed, because I think the notion is that they have immortality, right? Like, but I think the point with them, what if they can't be killed? What if they're like, because the point with trolls, right, is that they're like flatworms. Like if you cut off a troll's arm, then it will just grow another troll. So what if the only way that they can die is through fire or acid, right? Otherwise, even if you knock them out, they'll respawn. And that's just generally true of trolls anyway. So I think that most of these trolls then have lived for thousands of years, right? Every troll that is alive today was alive when they were first cursed. Like, they don't reproduce, they don't make more trolls. There's like a diminishing number of them, right, as they get killed by fire. But they can also multiply, right? So if you fight a troll and you cut off its arm, and I think that they kind of fall apart really easily. I think that's sort of part of it, right? Like, they can reproduce, but sort of only by budding. So maybe not every troll that was alive now, because some of them might have been like sort of reborn. But maybe they're the opposite of Gale of Doers, where like a troll, if you cut off a troll's finger and it grows a new troll, that's basically the same troll. You know, it's not a different troll. They have like the same mind, kind of like a clone. They can reproduce only by splitting or budding. So what if you would get like troll hordes? So like a troll horde is a gang of trolls. It's like a group of trolls that all share one mind, because they're all split off from the original troll, you know? It would be voiced by Mel Brooks. So it's like, again, I'm just trying to think the opposite of the Gale of Doer, where the Gale of Doer like forgets who it was and starts fresh. Does the troll remember who it was? Right, like cutting off a troll's finger grows another troll that it also remembers. So like they can have these packs of them that are all like weirdly like hive mind like, right? Ooh, can the original tolerate the derivative offcast troll? Yeah, that's kind of cool because then they're like constantly at war with each other. So they don't have a horde, right? They're split by, but they share a troll that's born from another troll. Hates, because it's self-loathing, right? From another troll. Hates. Reminds me of the spell, I think it's clone, right? Hates the copycat. And seeks to destroy it. I think just in general, trolls hate other trolls more than anything else. More than people, more than whatever, right? Like, they're not permitted to kill themselves. They gather around lava and stare at it longingly. Yeah, interesting. They can't kill themselves, but they hate themselves. Yeah, because you're right. Why wouldn't they just like throw themselves into a volcano or something? I think they hate to be seen. I think they attack humans and stuff because, yeah, I would think not as it is crazy, but also the representation of the punishment put upon it. I think that it like they hate to be observed. I think if like anyone sees them, they go into like a murderous frenzy, right? Because they feel like they're ugly and horrible, right? Like, they hate to be observed or seen by other creatures. But are and fly into murderous rages. Rages when encountering other creatures. So they're like immediately hostile, right? Immediately hostile to all other things. Do they eat? Like, I think they can eat. I think that's fine. I think because like but I wonder, do they want to? Like, if they don't die naturally, if they're just immortal forever, right? Like, do they still eat? Or do they just kill things because they can't bear to be seen, you know? Like, I like that they're not permitted to kill themselves. Too cowardly almost to kill themselves, like too afraid. I like the idea that they are afraid of fire still, like incredible fear of fire, even though it's the only thing that would kill them, right? That would end their agony. This is really dark. I like, so there probably aren't that many in Khûm, but I think they're called scrags, which are sea trolls, which I think are trolls that threw themselves into the sea in an attempt to drown, but instead grew gills, right? They're like, you're not permitted to die. Yeah. Ooh. Talk with one more than once. They think of themselves as, oh, is the original troll? That's kind of cool. Yeah. They kill because if they do, they can sleep for one night. That's interesting. Would the gods want to encourage them to do that, though? I think it's neat. It's very spooky. But then it seems like chasing, like encountering people and silencing them is their main job because they want to sleep. But I do like the notion of sleep being something that like eludes them, you know? Okay. I'm not opposed to it. I'm trying to figure out like the theological argument there. They kill because killing grants them one night of respite. So this is a weird extra, probably, I don't think there's like a mechanic to it, but I like the idea that they are sleepless and mad. My instinct is like if they drop someone to 0 hit points, you know, they make a constitution save to stay awake, but I don't know. I don't want to add too many extra mechanics. I think that's like I think that's a story that like they're sleepless and they wander the world and that only killing is what allows them to sleep. but I don't know that anyone has ever seen that happen. No one's ever seen a sleeping troll, right? And so that's the story that they tell. No one has ever seen a sleepless troll. Okay, so my question is, I think this is all great. I like all this stuff. Trolls, I think, are pretty universal in the world. What's going on with the trolls in Khûm? You know, what are these trolls? How do they relate to dwarves? They seem to be less tied to any particular other races or anything like that, right? They're just kind of like wandering monsters. I like the notion of them adapting, though, right? That like maybe some trolls tried to wander into the cold and freeze to death, and so like they somehow found a way to survive, right? They grew fur, or they did something like that, right? That like the notion of a scrag being a troll that threw itself into the sea to drown, and it grew gills. So like, what's the equivalent here? What's the cold version of them, right? Because I imagine that's mainly what we would be getting. Maybe there weren't any trolls like in ancient history. Like there were no trolls in Khûm, but there are trolls now. Like they've come since during its glory days. The dwarves would have fought them off. They couldn't cross the high mountains, etc., right? Like after the sorrows, trolls began to creep into Khûm, seeking a respite from the torments and cruelties of the rest of the world, right? Cue dashboard confessional. Trolls that went into the tunnels lost their eyes. That's cool. They're kind of like, we have Grimlocks, which are sort of similar. So now, like, is Khûm like lousy with trolls? Are there trolls running around? Trolls adapted to the cold climate. Capital T. Climate are now prevalent in Khûm. Now prevalent in Khûm, attacking dwarves and humans whenever or on sight. I like that there's this element of like, no, don't look at me, I'm hideous. Like I think there's something about that that's really appealing to me. Like I don't mind the idea of them attacking so that way they can sleep, but I think the driving thing for me is their shame. It's less about, yes, I do think they're sleepless because they're constantly in agony. I think that's cool, but I like that shame is their motivator, that like the gods put this curse upon them, right? I think that's neat. Maybe the fire damage would not hurt the ice trolls as much as normal because they are too elementally cold, need to be thawed out a little first. Yeah, like, that's kind of cool. I was gonna ask, like, what is an ice troll like, you know? Ice troll. There are yetis, I think, up here as another monster we have to do at some point, but I think yetis and trolls are different. Probably have some cool name. Ice trolls. Fire damage is less effective against ice trolls than against regular trolls. I think it still prevents them from regenerating, but I wonder if they're like resistant to it. Kind of neat. So what are some hooks? How can we, I mean, I think threat is definitely combat. They try to kill you, right? Combat. A troll is murderous on sight and will not. Troll is a murderous, pitiful wretch that attacks on sight. So what are some hooks? I mean, obviously just like they see a troll, right? I think the idea of like trying to talk to one, you know, or interacting with a troll in some way that isn't combat is an interesting hook to me, right? Ooh, that's kind of a neat look, Alan. They like they're known for the like incredibly long hair that hangs over them. Yeah. Known for their Incredibly long hair. I think that's a cool visual that most trolls don't have. Long hair that drags on the ground. Yeah, cool. They can't cut it. Cool. Yeah, I like that. So hooks. Something of, obviously a troll attacks the party is like way too obvious. What's an interesting spin on that? Like a troll, like I like the idea of them trying to talk to one or something like that, right? Like a troll. Ooh, what about a troll haunts a hot spring because it like haunts a hot spring because it brings blessed relief. Yeah, there are a couple of hot springs, and so the notion that like it would maybe calm it down enough that you could speak with it, right? Which I think is really cool. I like that idea. That like something about like it doesn't kill the troll because it doesn't deal damage, but the fire, the pain of it, like actually gets it to calm down. You know, I think that's really neat. Ooh, yeah, troll hair could be useful. For a spell reagent, troll hair is a valuable spell component. Feels a little the hair is such a cool image because it's this like waterfall that comes, it's all white, you know, and they're like hunched and kind of like it's dragging behind them. It feels very like Japanese, like that seems like like how you would describe an oni, which I think is cool. I like that image. But it also, like, I feel like I've seen a lot of like cute little Norwegian or Scandinavian depictions of trolls where they have super long hair, so it feels really classic, but it's not something that's usually done with a D&D troll. It's another cool troll hook. This will be our last thing, and then we'll wrap up for tonight. Yeah, this is good. We have 4 monsters done. That was awesome. One more troll hook. Something with the regen, something with like, I remember we had a character who who like fought a troll and like cut off a finger of the troll and then put it in a bag of holding, and then just over time the troll slowly grew and grew and grew. I think he would like throw meat in there every once in a while, but like when it was just a finger and it was growing, it didn't have a mouth yet, and then eventually he just like dumped like half of a troll on somebody. Stringing a magical bow or something. Oh, the bow of a dwarven fiddle, yeah, is a valuable, is needed to string a bow or an instrument. Kind of cool. Yeah, there's like a wind lance style crossbow atop one of the dwarven holds that maybe it like, yeah, maybe you need troll hair because it's like the thickest. Less magical hair could be woven into hempen rope for stronger ropes. Yeah, that's true. I want one like actual like encounter with a troll. Something about its regenerative qualities or something, right? Like, I like the idea of someone like smuggling a troll hand or a troll finger into somebody's bag or something like that, right? Like that's a means of sabotage. As they cut off a troll's finger and then they like throw it in. They hide it on your person somewhere, or they smuggle it into the like someone dropping a troll's finger down a chimney into a dwarven hold and it grows into a troll, right? Someone drops a troll digit into the chimney of a dwarven hold, you know, in order to cause chaos and sabotage. I think that's kind of neat. Transplant market is flooded with troll organs in Khûm. Ooh, that's cool. Yeah. But I like that they show up afterwards, right? Like, it's already happened. The party is tasked. Well, scattering it makes sense, but wouldn't they just burn it? Because if you scatter it, that makes 5 new trolls, right? It's a cool idea, but I wonder if it actually has the wrong effect, right? Like, I feel like they would just burn them all. I like the notion of like, hey, take this thing and go get rid of it. Okay, I think that's actually pretty good, everybody. So let's see, what did we do? We did the Oread, the Stone Mother, which I really think is cool. We did the Galeb Doers, the kind of like trickster stone spirits. I think was much more interesting than the Galeb Doers as they exist in the monster manual, right? Which is here, yep. You guys can't see that, the Galeb door. We did the Metal Master, which I think is cool as well. I really like I think my favorite thing about the Metal Master was the hit that they were domesticated, they were really, really small, and now they've grown huge, right? That was Megara's idea, I think, which is awesome. The Metal Master, Sword Slug, which is here. And then lastly, we did the Troll, which, you know, we had some world building for already, but I think a lot of the cool details of it got brought out here. I think the hair was probably my favorite detail about the Troll, you know, adding that little extra flavor. Great. We'll be back next week. I think next week we're doing the Mega Dungeon, so we're going to start talking about True Throne, which is kind of like the seat. It was the former seat of Clan True Silver, who are the royal clan, essentially. And it's obviously been abandoned, and now it's meant to be kind of an Undermountain style, like 7 levels of this huge dungeon we can explore, and we're going to start to kind of design that next time. Great, thanks for coming, everybody. This has been the World Building Stream. We are Sundays at 6 p.m. I know most of you guys are patrons, but you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/xbwebseries to support us. And you can check out my website, which is prodm.net. That's pro-dm.net if you want to hire me to run a game for you. But otherwise, we'll be back next week with more world building, working on this dwarf campaign. It was a really nice session today, guys. It was awesome to have so many people. It really means a lot to you guys want to come out and talk to me about all this goofy stuff. At this point, like half of the campaign is, you know, your guys' ideas. So maybe I'll make like a big list of everyone who's come out and thank you in the credits of the podcast. That could be kind of cool. Anyway, I'm going to go have some macaroni and cheese that my wife is making because it's mac and cheese night. I will talk to you guys next